In Hollywood, true mentorship is rarer than a blockbuster hit. It's a quiet, guiding hand that can build a career, define a legacy, and forge a character strong enough to survive the spotlight. For decades, one of television's most iconic figures, Tom Selleck, has carried the wisdom of a relationship like that. Now, at 80 years old, through his memoir and recent interviews, Selleck is finally opening up about the profound bond he shared with his hero, the legendary James Garner. This isn't just a story about two stars who were friends. It's the story of a single piece of advice delivered in the humble setting of Garner's van that didn't just save a TV show from being a flop, it fundamentally shaped the man Tom Selleck would become. What did Garner say that was so powerful? The answer is a lesson in integrity, power, and the quiet courage to just be yourself. Imagine being on the verge of your big break after a string of failed TV pilots. That was a 35-year-old Tom Selleck. The moment that changed, everything didn't. Happened in a fancy office, but in the souped-up van of his idol, James Garner. The advice Garner gave him not only saved his role in Magnum P.I., but became the foundation of his entire life. After years of staying quiet about it, Tom Selleck is finally sharing the full story. The truth about the mentor who taught him not just how to be a star, but how to be a leader. To really get the weight of James Garner's words, you have to understand the Hollywood of the 1970s. You had the established titans, the guys who defined cool for a generation. And then you had the new wave of talented, hungry actors trying to get a foothold. Tom Selleck, with his tall frame and movie star looks, was definitely in that second group. A former college athlete with a business degree from USC, he'd more or less stumbled into acting, and he'd paid his dues. He did the whole circuit, from guest spots on The Dating Game to a contract with Fox's new talent program. He worked hard, and he struggled. Selleck starred in six television pilots that never went to series. In an industry that only counts the wins, he was dangerously close to being labeled the guy who almost made it. At 35, he knew time was running out. Through all that uncertainty, he looked up to James Garner. But this wasn't just a fan crush. It was the deep respect of one professional for another. Garner wasn't just a movie star, he had revolutionized television with his character Jim Rockford in The Rockford Files. Before Rockford, TV detectives were slick, perfect heroes who never broke a sweat or worried about rent. Jim Rockford was the opposite. He was a guy living in a beat-up trailer in Malibu who was constantly getting roughed up. His plans often went sideways, and he was always annoyed by his clients. He wasn't a superhero. He was a real person, a charming, funny, and deeply relatable guy who happened to solve crimes. Selleck saw how powerful that was. He realized Garner's genius wasn't in playing a perfect hero, but a perfectly flawed one. Garner brought a blue-collar, everyman quality to his roles that made him beloved. That's the kind of actor Selleck wanted to be. He didn't want to just be the handsome guy. He wanted to be interesting, to play characters with rough edges. Their paths first crossed on The Rockford Files, where Selleck landed the recurring role of Lance White. The character was a parody of the typical TV hero, a suave, impossibly perfect private eye who made Rockford look like a mess. On screen, they were total opposites. Off-screen, however, Selleck was watching Garner's every move. He saw how Garner treated the crew, how he fought for the scripts, and how he led the show. He was taking notes. Selleck even recalled a time as a teenager when he almost beamed his future idol with a golf ball, thinking to himself, "I'm gonna kill Maverick." Little did he know, the man he almost took out with a 9-iron would one day save his career. This period was critical. Selleck wasn't just another struggling actor anymore. He was an apprentice, whether Garner knew it or not, and he was learning lessons that would soon become absolutely essential. His big break was just around the corner, and right along with it, the biggest crisis of his career. After so many near misses, the offer finally came. It was the one, a leading role in a new series from Universal, set in paradise. The show was Magnum P.I. On paper, it was a dream come true, but when Tom Selleck read the script, his heart sank. The character of Thomas Magnum was originally written as a perfect James Bond guy, a flawless super spy with air hostesses on each arm. It was a total cliché. Selleck was horrified. He told the producers, "I just don't want to play what I look like. I really want to do something with some humor." Think about the conflict he was facing. This was the golden ticket he'd been waiting for, and it felt completely wrong. Taking the role as written would mean compromising everything he admired in actors like James Garner. But fighting it was a huge risk. He was the star of 6 failed pilots, so who was he to make demands? The studio could just find another handsome actor, and his career would be over. This was it. His professional crossroads. To make matters even more stressful, he'd just been offered the role of a lifetime, Indiana Jones, in Raiders of the Lost, Ark. But he had already shot the Magnum pilot, and CBS, hearing about the Indy offer, exercised its option and refused to let him out of his contract. He was trapped. He was contractually bound to a show whose main character he couldn't stand. Feeling lost, he reached out to the one person he knew would get it, James Garner. They met in Garner's van, a surprisingly humble setting for a conversation that would change TV history. Selleck explained his dilemma. He had this incredible opportunity with Magnum, but he hated the character. He wanted to play a real, flawed human being like Jim Rockford, not a slick caricature. He was torn. And in that van, James Garner gave him the piece of advice that would define his career. Sitting in that van, Garner listened patiently as Selleck poured out his anxieties. He got it. He knew the pull of a big contract and the misery of a bad role. True to form, Garner started by saying he wasn't the type to give advice, but then he looked at Selleck and gave him a master class in Hollywood power dynamics. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," Selleck remembers Garner saying, "but I can tell you this. If they want you, you'll never have more power than you do right now. If you feel like making a stand, this is your chance. If the show succeeds, your power will grow." This advice was brilliant, and here's why. First, it was about timing. Garner knew that the moment before a show starts filming is a unique window of power. The studio had chosen Selleck. They had invested in him. At that point, he wasn't just some actor they could swap out. He was the key to their show. Garner was telling him this was his one real shot to fix the character from the ground up. Second, it was a lesson in playing the long game. If the show succeeds, your power will grow. Garner wasn't just thinking about the pilot. He was thinking about Season 3, Season 5, Season 8. He was telling Selleck that if he fought for the character now and the show became a hit because of it, the studio would have to trust his instincts for years to come. This wasn't just a fight for one script. It was an investment in his own future. And finally, Garner was giving him permission to trust his gut. He wasn't telling Selleck what to do. He was giving him the courage to do what he already knew was right. Garner knew flawed heroes were better because he'd built his own career on that truth. He was essentially saying, "Your instincts are right. Fight for them." Selleck said that pep talk gave me the courage to make his stand. He went back to the producers and pitched his vision for Thomas Magnum. Not a James Bond clone, but a funny, flawed, and relatable Vietnam vet. A guy who could be a bit of a man-child, who had real friendships, and who was haunted by his past. He wanted to create a character with the spirit of Jim Rockford, just in a Hawaiian shirt, and because the studio wanted him, they listened. The character was completely overhauled. The result was a hero so human that the Smithsonian later honored the show for its positive and realistic portrayal of Vietnam veterans. Magnum P.I. became a massive hit and an 80s icon, and Tom Selleck became a superstar. All because one man had the wisdom to see the truth, and another had the courage, inspired by his mentor, to fight for it. That advice from James Garner wasn't a one-and-done deal. It became the operating manual for Tom Selleck's entire career. The lessons were about more than just script notes. They were about leadership and integrity. On the set of Magnum P.I., Selleck became the leader. He learned from Garner, and from Hawaii Five-0 star Jack Lord, that the star of the show sets the tone for everyone. Selleck recalled working on tense sets and promising himself, "Boy, if I ever have my own show, that is never going to happen." He made sure the Magnum cast and crew felt like a family. He was the quarterback, a term he still uses to describe the lead's responsibility. This was Garner's mentorship in action. This philosophy became his calling card. Decades later, when he stepped into the role of patriarch Frank Reagan on Blue Bloods, he brought that same playbook to the set. The show's family dinner scenes are its heart, a tradition Selleck fought to include before the show even started. Off-screen, he nurtured that same sense of family among the cast. It's the direct legacy of James Garner's influence passed down and put into practice for over 40 years. The mentorship that started on The Rockford Files grew into a genuine friendship. They were cut from the same cloth, sharing a love for Westerns and a belief in no-nonsense professionalism. Their easy camaraderie was obvious when they reunited on screen in the 2003 Western Monty Walsh. As Selleck reflects on his career at age 80, it's clear how much he owes his mentor. He credits Garner with teaching him how to navigate Hollywood, with his integrity intact. He learned that real power isn't about having a bigger trailer. It's about earning the creative freedom to do good work and creating an environment where others can do the same. The bond between Tom Selleck and James Garner is a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have on another. Their work on The Rockford Files and Magnum P.I. left a huge mark on television history. So, what are your favorite memories of these two? Was it a classic Jim Rockford scene that made you laugh? Or a touching moment from Magnum P.I.? Maybe it's a Frank Reagan family dinner from Blue Bloods that sticks with you. Share your stories in the comments below. We read everyone. And if you enjoyed this piece of Hollywood history, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. As Tom Selleck reflects on his life and career, he does so with the quiet confidence of a man guided by a clear set of principles. With his memoir, You Never Know, he isn't just telling his own story, he's honoring those who shaped him, and at the top of that list is James Garner. The truth Selleck is sharing at 80 is this: James Garner was more than a friend. He was the architect of his confidence. That advice in the van was the key that unlocked everything. It empowered him to turn Thomas Magnum from a cardboard cutout into one of TV's most beloved characters. It gave him a philosophy of leadership that put people before ego, creating on-set families that lasted for decades. Garner's legacy doesn't just live in his own iconic roles. It lives on, vibrantly, in the career of Tom Selleck. You can see it in the integrity of Frank Reagan, in the family dinners on Blue Bloods, and in the way Selleck has carried himself for over half a century. It's a story of how one icon quietly passed the torch to another, and how a single conversation, grounded in wisdom and respect, can echo for decades.